You know, there are characters you just watch, and there are those whose lives you literally live alongside them. Leon Scott Kennedy is exactly one of them. One of the most famous characters in games, and possibly one of the most broken. We've been following his story since 1998. From the very moment he first appears as a young guy who simply arrived in Raccoon City for his first day of work, and had no idea that this day would divide his life into a before and after. In this video, we'll walk his entire path, from a green rookie who just graduated from the academy and still believes he can help people, to a man for whom a tyrant is no longer a nightmare, but just another target in his sights. But the most important thing is not his strength, his experience, or even his skills. It's what happened to him between all these events. Because this is not a story about how a man becomes a hero. It's a story of how he is molded into one. And with each new installment, there is less and less of the man left. And today, we'll try to understand what is ultimately left of him. Leon's story begins as simply as possible, and even a bit ironically. He doesn't fly into Raccoon City as a hero. He isn't sent there on a mission. He's just heading to his very first day on the job as a police officer. An ordinary guy who just graduated from the academy and wants to start a new life. But already here, things don't go according to plan. Leon is late, and essentially, it's this exact delay that saves his life, because by the time he makes it to the city, Raccoon City is already in a state of total collapse. His journey begins at a gas station. Night, rain, a strange silence, and a man acting clearly erratically. And it's right here that he has his first encounter with something entirely beyond the scope of what he was trained for. This is not a criminal. This is not an armed conflict. This is a person who is no longer human. After this, he meets Claire Redfield, another random person who ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. For a brief moment, there is a feeling that they can get out together, that the situation is still controllable, but literally a few minutes later, the city separates them. And this is where his real journey begins. He makes it to the police station, which logically should have been the safest place in the city. It's the center of power, a place where they were supposed to keep the situation under control. But in reality, it's no longer a stronghold, but an enclosed space filled with traces of failure, notes from fallen officers, signs of a struggle, barricaded doors. Everything shows that the system has failed. And inside this space, Leon begins to change. At first, it's just fear. He doesn't understand what's happening, doesn't grasp the scale of it all. Then comes caution. He learns to check corners, listen to sounds, conserve ammo. But most importantly, he learns to make decisions. Every encounter with an enemy is not just a firefight, it's a choice. To fight or to bypass. To take a risk or save resources. And gradually, he transitions from a state of panic to a state of control. At the same time, he doesn't lose his humanity. He helps those he meets. He trusts Ada Wong, despite the strangeness in her behavior. He still tries to act like a human, not like a machine. But the game constantly shows him that this isn't enough. Through the story with William Birkin, it becomes clear that everything happening is not an accidental disaster, but the result of specific decisions, experiments by the Umbrella Corporation, greed, and the attempt to control the uncontrollable. And at this moment, Leon's main illusion is shattered. He realizes this is not a world where you can just do the right things and fix everything. By the end of the game, he makes it out of the city. He survives. But the important thing is he doesn't win. He doesn't save Raccoon City, doesn't stop the disaster. He simply goes through it. That is exactly what makes him the Leon we will see later. Not a hero who saved the world, but a man who first faced the fact that the world can't be saved and learned to survive in it. After the events in Raccoon City, 6 years go by, and during this time, Leon's life changes completely. He is no longer that guy who first arrived in a ruined city as a rookie cop. He is not allowed back to a normal life because he knows too much. Instead, he's forced to work for the government. Technically, it looks like a promotion and a chance to continue his career, but in reality, he simply has no choice. They make it clear to him that Sherry Birkin, the girl he saved in Raccoon City, will only be safe if he agrees to cooperate. And he agrees, because he already understands how this system works. Over these 6 years, he undergoes training, participates in operations, and gradually turns into a professional agent. Right beside him all this time is a man who becomes his mentor, Jack Krauser. He trains him, shares his experience, shows him how to survive in real combat situations. Essentially, it is Krauser who becomes the one to finally shape Leon as a fighter. By the beginning of Resident Evil 4, Leon is already working directly for the US government and receives an assignment to go to Spain to save Ashley Graham, the US president's daughter. At first glance, it looks like a standard operation, but it very quickly becomes clear that things go far beyond that. He encounters people infected with a parasite, a cult, and yet another attempt to control people through biological weapons. But the main blow does not come from the enemies. The main blow is Krauser. It turns out that the man who was his mentor, with whom he spent those 6 years, has switched to the other side. He becomes part of the very threat that Leon has to fight. It's no longer just a conflict with an enemy. It's a personal betrayal. And at this moment, another of Leon's pillars finally collapses. He loses not just trust in the system, but trust in people in principle, because even the one who was his role model turns out to be part of the exact same game. Parallel to this, Ada Wong returns to his life once again. In the second part, he trusted her, believed that she was on his side, and at some point even started to perceive her as an ally, but in the end, she disappeared, leaving behind only questions. And now, years later, she appears once again, alive, calm, just as unpredictable as before. For Leon, this becomes yet another confirmation that in this world, you can't rely on anyone. He no longer tries to understand her motives, and does not expect honesty from her. He accepts her as a part of the same reality, where everyone acts in their own interests. Against all this, Leon himself already looks completely different. He acts confidently, makes decisions quickly, doesn't panic, and doesn't doubt. His behavior remains more rigid and rational. By the finale, he completes his mission, saves Ashley, and eliminates the threat. Technically, it's a victory, but inside, it is no longer perceived as something significant. He doesn't feel that anything has changed or gotten better. The fourth part shows an important stage in his journey, the moment when he finally stops believing in people. After Krauser's betrayal and Ada's return, he realizes that in this world, there are no stable allies, no clear boundary between friend and foe, and it is exactly from this moment that he begins to act differently. Not as a person trying to figure out what's happening, but as a person who simply completes the mission, relying on no one but himself. By the events of Resident Evil 6, Leon Kennedy arrives already as a fully formed agent. But it's important to understand what lies behind this. It's not just experience and skills. These are years spent inside the system, where the exact same mistakes are repeated over and over again. He has already seen how cities collapse, how people turn into weapons, and how decisions made at a high level lead to disasters that people like him then have to clean up. The plot begins in the city of Tall Oaks, where Leon arrives along with the US president. The president is going to reveal the truth about the events in Raccoon City and about what happened in '98 and what role the government and corporations played. For Leon, this is not just another mission. This is a chance to close the story that defined his entire life. But everything goes according to a familiar scenario. The outbreak of infection happens almost instantly, and the situation spirals out of control in a matter of minutes. People start transforming, the city plunges into chaos, and it becomes obvious that no lessons were learned from the past. A key moment happens right after the disaster begins. The president gets infected, and Leon is faced with a choice that sums up his entire journey. He shoots, because he understands there will be no other outcome. This decision is made quickly, without hesitation, and this is exactly where his transformation shows. If before he would have tried to find another option, hoped for salvation, now he acts based on experience and not on faith. After this, Leon continues his journey with Helena Harper, and through her character, the theme of personal responsibility is added to the story. Helena turns out to be tied to what is happening. Her actions became part of the chain that led to the disaster. At any other point in his life, Leon might have tried to figure it out, understand the motives, find a fair solution. But here he doesn't do that. He doesn't waste time looking for the guilty and doesn't try to change the system. He just moves forward because he understands that this is neither the first nor the last case, and his task is not to change the rules of the game, but to minimize the consequences. As events unfold, it becomes clear that the scale of what is happening goes far beyond a single city. The virus spreads, new outbreaks appear, and the situation turns into a global crisis. This finally destroys the illusion that such disasters can be localized and stopped once and for all. Against this background, Ada Wong appears again, but her return no longer triggers in Leon the emotional reaction it used to. He doesn't try to figure out whose side she is on, nor does he seek explanations for her actions. To him, she becomes just another element in the system, which always operates by its own rules. By the finale, Leon completes his task. He survives, helps stop another threat, and does everything required of him. But at the same time, it becomes obvious that this brings him neither relief nor a sense of closure. And the main change happens not at the level of events, but at the level of the character himself. If before he acted because he believed in the outcome, now he acts out of inertia. It is no longer a choice, but a way of existing. He continues doing what he did because he simply doesn't know any other way. That is exactly why Resident Evil 6 becomes the point where Leon finally loses himself. He stays on the side of good. But this is no longer connected to inner beliefs. It's simply the only role he has left. After the events of Resident Evil 6, Leon's story doesn't end, but its tone noticeably changes. If earlier we saw him inside disasters, in the moment when it's necessary to make decisions and act, then in the animated films, there's an opportunity to look at him from the outside and understand what he's become between these missions. In Resident Evil Damnation, Leon travels to Eastern Europe where a civil war is raging and bioweapons are actively used. Essentially, it's the exact same situation as before, just in a different place and on a different scale. The state, corporations, military conflicts, and against the backdrop of all this, infected and experiments reappear that spiral out of control. The most important thing here is not the plot itself, but how Leon himself behaves in it. He no longer reacts to what is happening like someone encountering it for the first time. He shows no surprise, no confusion, no attempt to make sense of things. He acts like a professional who understands in advance how it will all end. He calmly assesses the situation, makes decisions, and proceeds with the task. Everything that used to be a shock to him has now become part of the job. This is exactly what shows that he has completely adapted to this world. But this adaptation is not about strength. It's about him no longer perceiving what's happening as something abnormal. In Resident Evil Vendetta, this theme is revealed even more strongly. Here, for the first time, Leon is shown outside of a mission, outside of combat, outside of constantly moving forward. And it is precisely at this moment that it becomes clear what state he is actually in. He lives alone. He has no normal life outside of work. His environment is an empty apartment, alcohol, and rare contacts with those connected to his past. He is not building a future, not trying to change anything in his life. He just exists between assignments. This is an important point because previously the viewer had no opportunity to see the consequences of everything he went through. In the games, he is always in motion, always in action. But here we can see what happens when this action ends too. And it becomes obvious that all of this hasn't gone anywhere. All the events he went through have stayed with him. All the decisions he made. All the people he couldn't save. It hasn't disappeared, it just doesn't show up while he's busy working. When he returns to the operation, he's effective again. He quickly gets into the process, acting precisely and without unnecessary emotion. But now it's clear it's not because he's become stronger, it's because he's learned to shut everything else out. And this is the key transformation of the character. He didn't just break in one moment. He gradually reached a state where he simply has no other mode of existence. He can't stop because then he'd have to face everything he's accumulated over the years. So he continues to work, not because he wants to, but because he just can't do otherwise. The events of Resident Evil Requiem take place in 2026, and considering the Raccoon City incident happened in '98, it becomes clear that Leon Kennedy has been living inside this story for almost 30 years. This isn't just a series of missions, it's decades of constant struggle with the exact same consequences of the virus, bioweapons, and the people who keep trying to control them. And for the first time in all this time, they directly show one important thing: the consequences. And not just on a global scale, but on the level of Leon himself. It turns out that everything he's gone through hasn't passed without a trace. He starts suffering from the aftermath of the infection he encountered back in Raccoon City. It's no longer just memories or a psychological burden, but a very real physical problem that's gradually making itself known. Essentially, for the first time in the character's history, he's in a situation where he doesn't just fight the bio-threat, he partially becomes a carrier of it. Parallel to this, a new heroine appears in the story, Grace Edgecroft, an FBI analyst investigating a series of deaths related to a new virus. Her storyline is built like a classic horror: enclosed spaces, a lack of resources, the fear of the unknown. She acts like a normal person who finds herself in an extreme situation, afraid, doubting, and panicking. Against this backdrop, you can clearly see who Leon has become. He no longer reacts to what is happening the way others do. Where Grace is afraid, he acts. Where she hides, he pushes forward. He has more experience, more weapons, and more control over the situation. He makes decisions quickly, doesn't hesitate, and wastes no time on doubts. But what matters is how it looks from the outside. This is no longer just professionalism. It's a state where a person stops seeing what's happening as something extraordinary. Everything that used to be a shock to him became part of the usual process. The plot, meanwhile, is again built on a familiar scheme: a new virus, a new organization, an attempt to control people through biological weapons. This time, it's the S virus, which is rumored to be able to affect human consciousness. But for Leon, this is no longer something unique. He's faced this too many times to perceive it as something new. In the second half of the game, the focus shifts to him and the story takes him back to Raccoon City. This is an important moment because it's not just a location for the sake of nostalgia. It's the point where it all began, and to which he's forced to return again after almost 30 years. And here comes the feeling of a vicious circle. The same streets, the same enemies, the same logic of what's happening. The difference is only in one thing: in Leon himself. If he used to try to figure it out, understand, find the cause, now he doesn't do that. He doesn't ask unnecessary questions or look for explanations, he just does his job. Even his condition, age, fatigue, the aftermath of the infection don't change his behavior at all. He continues to act just as efficiently as before, but at the same time, it becomes noticeable that it's no longer a choice, but a habit. This is exactly what the main meaning of his arc in this part is. He didn't win this war. He didn't stop the system that triggers all this. And most importantly, he didn't get out of it. He became part of it. And the most powerful thing here is not that he continues to fight, but that he can no longer stop, even if he wanted to. If you look at the entire journey of Leon Kennedy, it becomes clear that this is not the story of a classic hero. He's not the kind of character who goes from weak to strong and gets a reward at the end. He's not someone who saves the world and retires to a quiet life. His story is one of gradual decay. First, he loses his illusions in Raccoon City when he realizes the world doesn't work the way he thought. Then he loses his trust in people, facing betrayal and manipulation. After that, he loses himself when he starts acting not because he wants to, but because he has to. And ultimately, he reaches a state where he simply keeps moving forward. Not because he believes in the outcome, not because he hopes to change anything, but because it's the only thing he knows how to do. Resident Evil Requiem shows this very directly. Almost 30 years have passed, and the situation hasn't changed. The same viruses, the same mistakes, the same people who think they can control everything. Only Leon himself changes. He gets older, more experienced, tougher, but at the same time it becomes clear that he has no final destination. He has no moment where he can say that it's all over. And perhaps this is the main tragedy of his character. He hasn't lost, but he hasn't won either. He simply stayed inside this story and continues to live in it. Leon Kennedy is not perfect. He makes mistakes, he trusts the wrong people, he makes decisions that no one should have to make. And despite all of this, he never stopped. And perhaps that is exactly why he still remains one of the strongest characters in video games. Not because he's the most powerful, because he keeps moving forward, even then when there's no longer any point to it. If you liked this presentation and you want to see more similar breakdowns, be sure to write about it in the comments, drop a like, and subscribe to the channel. And, as always, see you on the next level.